You know, deep in the Cold War, something pretty bizarre happened. The United States, the actual government, officially sued the Soviet Union. And then, the entire case just vanished from the official record. Poof. So let's dive into this strange little piece of legal history.
I mean, that's the big question, right? This wasn't some minor tiff. This was a formal case filed at the world's highest court, the International Court of Justice. But if you go looking for the official record today, nope, it's gone. So what on earth happened?
Okay, and here's the smoking gun. This is an actual letter from the court registrar dated March 14, 1956. And look at the wording right there. The court ordered that the case should be, and I'm quoting, removed from its list. It's like the legal equivalent of a magic trick. Now you see it, now you don't.
Now let's be absolutely clear. This was not some filing mistake or a misunderstanding. No, this was a deliberate, really high-stakes legal move. On June 2, 1955, the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands personally handed over the application, officially suing the USSR. The Cold War had just stepped into the courtroom.
So to understand how this case just vanished, we first have to understand why it was filed in the first place, and it all goes back to a very tense encounter in the skies over the Sea of Japan.
This timeline really helps lay it all out for us. So the actual incident happens in October 1952, but look at that gap. It takes almost 3 years for the US to file the lawsuit in June of 55. The Soviet response comes just a couple of months later, and by March of 56, poof, the case is gone. That is a very short life for such a major lawsuit.
And this telegram, wow, it really breaks down what this was all about. It's a summary of the U.S. complaint, and it alleges that Soviet fighter jets attacked a U.S. Air Force B-29 bomber off the coast of Hokkaido, Japan. I mean, that is a very, very serious charge.
As you can probably guess, especially during the Cold War, that wasn't the end of the story. The Soviets, well, they had a completely different version of what went down. This was setting the stage for a classic he said, she said, but on a global scale.
So here you have it, two totally opposite stories. The U.S. was adamant. Its B-29 was flying over international waters when it was attacked out of the blue. But the Soviets, they claimed the American plane had actually crossed into their territory and this is the important part, that it opened fire first.
And this is exactly what international courts are supposed to be for, right? When two countries have a major dispute, the ICJ is meant to be the neutral party that wades through the evidence and figures out what's what. And that's what the U.S. was banking on.
Which brings us to the moment of truth. The court did its job. It formally notified the Soviet Union about the lawsuit. And the whole world was kind of holding its breath, waiting to see how the Kremlin would respond. Were they going to send in their top lawyers, present their evidence?
Well, what did they do? Did they prepare for a huge legal battle? Nope. Their response was simple, it was direct, and it was devastatingly effective. The entire answer came down to this single letter. August 26, 1955, the Soviet Chargé d'Affaires delivers the official response. There were no long legal arguments, no lists of witnesses. Just this one powerful document.
And here it is, the fatal blow. The letter says in no uncertain terms that the Soviet government finds the proposition to examine this case at the International Court of Justice unacceptable. It even goes on to say the very idea is deprived of any foundation. This isn't a legal defense, it's a complete and total rejection of the court's authority.
And that right there is the key to this whole mystery. See, the Soviets didn't argue the facts of the case, they just rejected the court itself. And that brings up a really fundamental question about how international law actually works.
It seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? How can a major country just say no thanks to the world's highest court? I mean, in a regular court, you can't just write a letter saying, I find this whole trial unacceptable. You have to show up. But international law, it turns out, plays by a very different set of rules.
And the big one is this principle called state consent. Basically, the International Court of Justice is more like an optional club than a mandatory court. Its power only comes from countries agreeing to let it have power over them. If a country hasn't consented to the court's jurisdiction for a specific fight, you just can't force them to play along.
And you don't even have to take my word for it. It's confirmed right here in the court's own index. Under jurisdiction of the court, it clearly lists the deciding factor: non-acceptance of jurisdiction by USSR. It's written right there in the official history of the case.
So when you break it all down, the process was actually pretty straightforward. The U.S. files the case. The
The court, like it's supposed to, sends an invitation to the Soviet Union to accept its jurisdiction for this one dispute. The Soviet Union says, "Niet." And because both sides hadn't agreed to be there, the court's hands were tied. It had absolutely no power to proceed, so it had no choice but to take the case off the books.
So, the mystery is solved. There was no secret backroom deal, no shady political pressure that made this all go away. The case vanished for one simple reason. The entire system of international justice is built on voluntary participation. The court sent an invitation to a legal showdown, and the Soviet Union just refused to RSVP.
And this whole Cold War ghost story leaves us with a pretty big question, one that's just as relevant today. If the world's highest court can only act when powerful countries agree to be judged, what happens when they just refuse the invitation? Who then is left to hold them to account?